Welcome to the Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, where every death had a life and every life had a story. My name is Jenny Johnson.
Hello, and I'm Diane Hartshorn.
Our guest today is actually the founder of a cemetery, the first of its kind, really. And when we talked a few weeks ago before we had her on the show, we had a lovely phone conversation, and I absolutely loved how this cemetery came to be. And as of May 18th, so coming up very quick, they are opening their second location in Auburn, Maine. So we would like to welcome to the show this evening Mel Bennett with
Welcome,
Life
Mel.
Forest Cemetery.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. What a nice introduction.
Oh, your cemetery is fabulous. It's so fun to be able to say your cemetery because you did come up with this concept, and we'll have you explain to our guests kind of how that came about. But what's so fascinating to me about this whole story is the way it takes the fear and the anxiety out of a traditional cemetery for those people who don't want to go to a cemetery because the idea is too almost gruesome to them or too sad to go to a traditional cemetery. You've brought about something that actually can give somebody peace and be connect with their loved ones that they've lost. And that's, I think, the best thing about Life Force, not to mention all the other really good stuff you have going on in the cemetery there. But I think it just makes your cemetery a really special place to be, both for the dead and the living in this case. So, Mel, why don't you tell us a little bit about Life Force, what it is, and how you came about with this particular concept?
Well, it's funny how you bring in the fear right away. I have a history of Life Forest that's kind of a bit surprising because I was not from death care. I had no plans to ever do this. So it came out of a passion project. And when I was younger, I grew up in a, a mill city called Lawrence, Massachusetts, and it's a blue collar city. And in that time frame, it was like the mid 1980s,
Mm-hmm.
and it was pretty tumultuous. Like there were riots breaking out in the streets of Lawrence, and my mother was always she was kind of a hippie, felt like you bring your kids outside, that's what you do. But it wasn't actually safe to be outside at the time. So she would bring us across the road from our, you know, multi-family house to this big rolling Catholic cemetery, where the newer graves are at the front, and then the old, further you go
Mm-hmm.
back, the older it gets. And they surround, I mean, they go for miles and miles in the area that I grew up. And so she would pack like a loaf of bread, a couple apples, some cheese, a frisbee, I don't know. And I would like blindly follow the loaf of bread into the depths of the cemetery so that my brother and I could play outside. And when we get there, I was like, oh, geez, Ma, like I don't like this place. It's scary. I don't want to be here, and she'd say, at this time it was a euphemism, but sweetheart, you don't have to be afraid. Like death is natural, and someday I'm gonna die and become a tree. And I said, well, and this is my young self, like it's ridiculous. And this is like the days of huge caskets. Cremation wasn't even a thing. So
Well, and you
I
were in a
understand.
Catholic cemetery, which meant you were probably surrounded more by crucifixes and statues, like
Yes,
holy statues and holy relics,
giant
more so than you
angels.
would have been. Yeah, I can see if you were already a little creeped out, where that would make it even a little more
Yeah, I mean,
uncomfortable.
the idea was to get our kids outside and get some fresh air and be kind of
Mm-hmm.
safe from the riots. But what I saw was like kind of not where my childhood self wanted to be.
Right.
And, in that process, it was like, fast forward, my mother really raised us. We ended up moving to a southern New Hampshire location, to kind of like an old farmstead area. And my brother and I grew up playing in the woods behind our house. And my mom was very active in our lives. She was so engaged in teaching us. to about, different Native American tribes or anything that sparked our interest, that she would embrace, and teach us. And she was a stay-at-home mom. And it was really a fantastic way to grow up. And not long after I became a young adult, I noticed that there were some issues going on with my mom. She just wasn't right. And it turned out that in her late 40s, early 50s, she had a early onset dementia
Oh my
diagnosis.
gosh, that's so
So
young.
yeah, it's really, really young. And at the time, I had two young children. So I became part of what they call like the sandwich generation,
Yep.
where you're taking care of young children and a parent at the same time. And I know that like so many, many people can relate to this. It's not, unfortunately, I wasn't the only person that experienced it, but I think those that have understand the amount of, balance and trauma and sacrifice that takes. And also just seeing my, vibrant, young, natural, beautiful mother just decline in a way that was, for me, very traumatic because, the last 5 years of her life, she stared at a ceiling. And I mean, we're
Mhm.
talking about somebody that's not even 60 years old yet. So I know that I don't know what you guys do as far as like I'm fairly new to video podcasts or podcasts, but there's a video of my mom on the website, and at some point maybe you
Mhm.
can watch it and you'll see her. But
Yeah.
when I was in that process, I learned something about loss and control and grief. And I remember times when I felt so out of control to give my mother any sense of peace. And I would grasp at these little things, like her feet were always cold. So I thought, well, if I could get socks that were just warm enough and I put them on her feet, like all this is going to just go away. Like we'll all be better and we're going to be okay. And, you do that, and for a minute, you'd maybe see a look of relief on her face, or you'd kind of have to hold her toes and her feet would warm up. And I would feel that moment, that very small moment of it's okay just for this moment. So you learn to appreciate moments and grasp at moments. And after she passed away, I finally felt this freedom like, wow, the disease no longer has her, and now it's my turn. I can give her something amazing. I am going to make sure that nobody forgets her in history. Like she is going to be somebody that is as special to me that I can share about her forever. But of course, I didn't know what to do. And it kind of came to this, giant realization in this moment where I got a phone call from my aunt who had asked me to meet her in a Starbucks parking lot. And so I did, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but she handed me a plastic bag. And I opened the bag, and inside the bag, it said, half the remains of Elise Dubuque.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, like, this is it. Like all of this amazing childhood she gave me, all the love that she gave my brother and I, and then the suffering, the immense amount of suffering at such a young age. She was just about to have her own life, right? Just about to have her time, and stared at a ceiling for 5 years, couldn't speak, couldn't walk, couldn't, like, she just was trapped. And there she is in a cardboard box in a plastic bag in a parking lot at a Starbucks. And I felt angry and sad, and so much so that I realized like I needed to do something really special for her. But instead I put her in my cabinet because I didn't know what to do. And this is where I feel that I have a special connection with families that I work with because I understand their grief and their desire to do something different, special for their person, you know? And there was a day that I was on my computer and I saw this urn that you could, plant a tree over ashes. And I was like, oh my gosh, my mother was right. She could be a tree. It's all come together. She must be a tree. This is going to happen. And, you know, I thought about it and I went to, well, maybe I'll order it and I'll put it in my yard. But the fact remained that even though I personally wasn't a huge fan of cemeteries, I understand their purpose. And they're very important. They hold history, they hold legacy, genealogy, vital records.
Yep.
Cemeteries are like the vein of all of the things that we can kind of learn about people. And in that, I realized she must have a cemetery burial. She needs a legal cemetery burial. It's important to me that she doesn't get lost in history. So I called around and I asked some cemeteries, would you be willing to plant this tree? And, the answer was like a resounding no. I mean, I learned a little bit more and I understand now why the roots and
Yeah.
caskets, and they're not friends. They don't like each other
No.
very much. And so the design of how the a cemetery isn't really leaning towards kind of that kind of commemoration. And so at that point I started looking for like maybe a little piece of land that I could bury my mom, and I thought, well, I could put her the coordinates of where she is on the deed. I could plant a tree. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do? I'll like hire a landscaper. It just got like out of control, right? I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do all this. And that's where John, my co-founder, came in because I was sharing with him what I was trying to do. And in that moment, he's like, it sounds a little crazy. What you're talking about, it's sounds a little crazy. But at the same time, it's actually really lovely. And maybe if that's something that you so strongly want, maybe other people would want it too, and it will become more reachable for you if you open it up to a larger audience. And in fact, his own mother's experience resonated with him there. And so we set out on the journey of life force. So that's kind of like how it all began. And I can say that it is a journey, and it's been 5 years now, and quite a bit of learning and work and appreciation for what cemeteries do. And the municipal cemetery worker is like my new unsung hero because the amount of things that get put on their plate,
Yeah.
uh, and then they're able to kind of magically in the background pull this off. I sometimes can't wrap my head around it, but um I think that what we have done has had this secondary kind of, I don't know what the word would be, but I knew it would be beautiful and natural, but I didn't understand at the beginning how much it would be a positive experience for the little kids. And that was kind of, I was maybe a little selfish in this. Like I wanted to commemorate my mom, and that's what motivated it. But unfortunately, in New England or in New Hampshire, and I hope not where you are, but my guess is maybe, we have a very difficult problem with addiction disease.
Mhm.
And we also have death by suicide, which has really kind of taken a lot of very young people
Yep.
from our community. And with these young people, they're in their 30s, 40s. They have small children, like 3 and 5-year-old kids, and they have their parent and their spouse and their children. It's just unfortunately this really devastating generational effect.
Mhm.
And, to see these little kids, we have a young man buried with us. His name's Justin. He loved Pink Floyd. He has a smile like like the size of Cincinnati. Like the guy was, I never met him. I talked to his tree, but I never met him. But I do know his family now very well. And the day that we buried him, it was so impactful because his two little boys had these little shovels and they were planting the tree. And they are smart children. They knew it was a heavy moment. And the tree kind of was placed and they felt good about helping. And after it was done, the littlest one looked up to his mom and he said, "Can we go swimming now?" And she says, "Oh, yeah, yeah." So she had it worked into their plan because we have a swimming hole close by and a brook that, they came casually, they helped to plant the tree. And she had their little swim trunks and put them on and they went swimming. And, every Father's Day, they come back, they leave some painted rocks. They'll go fishing in the river, hold the fish to the tree. Look, Dad.
Oh,
Um, and the beauty in that, in which I never could have comprehended, is that death became for these little boys like a comma instead of a period. Like when somebody passes that's so young like that in their midlife and yet a little younger, it's almost like it's not ready, it's not time. And this is kind of a softer place to land. Instead of this stone, they have something that's growing and evolving and allows for these children to kind of talk about them, talk to the tree, talk like, oh, the leaves are getting bigger, it's growing, and not be stagnant in a space where there's a stone, if that makes any sense. It
yeah,
changes.
because as they grow, the tree will grow.
Yeah.
And
And
it cycles through the seasons like the kids do, and the whole, like you said, a stone is definitely a more, as much as Diane and I love the stones and love that part of
they're
it for
beautiful. I
us.
love it too, but
The
yeah.
the idea that these children can grow up with their tree, their dad's tree, and cycle through the seasons, and it'll go through winter and spring and summer and fall, and so will they, and they will have a more positive connection then with where their dad is laid to rest than if he were in that traditional cemetery.
And life goes
It-
on. I mean, it's life. I mean, can you imagine birds building their nest in that tree and then they'll get to see
Mhm.
that? And it's just
And the
kind of
yeah, we
squirrels
did
and
have
the
we did have a
bunnies
bird
and
build a nest.
the
We did have
yeah.
a bird build a nest in one of the trees, and I was like, oh, this is so exciting. Um,
so
but
beautiful.
interestingly, it's my own grief experience kind of I took what I wanted for myself and then tried to say, well, why can't we do this in this environment? And I know for me, small acts, like people experience such immense amounts of grief that, you can't just take that away from them. But if you can offer something that helps them to move it,
Mhm.
a little bit, I think that that's a gift. And so we have a phone of the wind on the property where the kids will make a phone call and speak to their parent or their loved one. And the little guy's mom sent me a video, Samantha, of her son making a call to his dad, and it was like it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's this tangible thing in which the child can engage in and we can engage in. So, things like a grief labyrinth or a phone of the wind, and these small things that you can offer, like planting in a shared garden. I think it's helpful to people to be able to do those things. But also listening to what people want, and being
Mhm.
able to kind of incorporate that. And our families have amazing perspective and ideas, and we can do it. We could say, wow, that's great. Let's, one of the families, we have kind of stone walls on the property, And one of the families said, that can be a genealogical like object, like you can archaeological object,
There you go.
and you can map it. And we said, well, let's do it. Why not? You know? So we have 13 burial acres at Life Forest, and it's surrounded by 86 acres of conservation land. So there's about 100 acres total. And we have a public access easement, which is monitored by the Hillsborough Conservation Commission.
Nice.
So there's that third party watchdog all the time, which is really important. So all of these kind of factors have been a learning experience for me, but at the same time, really rewarding because I get to meet these amazing families, and we have the events. So we have the concerts. We have a summer concert series where somebody will come and play an acoustic guitar, and all the families will come and the kids will play and walk the trails, which is really cool. We had a harpist last year. We had a local two girls that played the ukulele.
Oh, fun.
That was great. And we had the midnight market last year, which was so well embraced, where all these local artisans came and like sold their wares.
I
And
love it.
we kind of kept it only to the trail, but we illuminated the burial trees. Only families were able to kind of go in and visit the tree
Right.
in the time frame. But we had a taco truck, and we had a sound bowls, and I mean a big
And you did
fire
this at
pit.
night?
Yeah, it was from 8 to midnight,
Oh,
and we
cool.
had marshmallows. So we had like a donation from marshmallows. We were raising money for NAMI to go towards kind of making sure that death by suicide in particular was kind of addressed. So we fundraise a little bit for those things that we want to make a difference in. And seeing everybody just sitting around roasting their marshmallows, talking about their person, waving to their tree, and kind of embracing life in that way was pretty great. But I think what was one of the best parts was, I have to say, it was a long day. And we all got home at like, I was like 2 in the morning. I'm like, oh. And then I thought, okay, I'm gonna get back up really early to make sure everything is clean. We have 45 vendors, a taco truck, and 600 people showed up. And I kid you not, I was ready for plastic forks and nachos and like, maybe a
Trash
cigarette butt.
and
Who knew, right?
yeah.
There was not a single piece of trash left, even though it was pitch black when everybody left.
Oh,
The level of respect that people hold in cemeteries and in that environment, I was shocked. Like, I mean, I even accidentally, you think it's
right.
Right.
pitch
Especially in
black.
the dark. Yeah.
Or the
No,
critters
I
getting
mean,
into it or something. Yeah.
yeah, I think, people respect it, and I love that. And um, I love that people understand that cemeteries are sacred spaces.
Oh,
And
Well, I
I
think
feel, yeah, I feel honored to be a part of that.
because you gave them a gift by having this place, and especially if there was a lot of parents and families of loved ones who suicided, no one else understands that unless they experienced it.
yeah.
It's terrible.
And for them to be able to come together to a point, even if they didn't say in each other, each one pretty much knew what the other one was going through. And like I said, you gave them something very, very priceless. And
Well, I
so,
can say it's not just me. We have a team.
well,
I
you
but I
started
can,
it.
I think when I studied kind of sociology and anthropology, and so part of when I was thinking about the design of Life Forest was the realization that there's a reason that cemeteries are here, and that reason needs to be respected, right? But as
Mhm.
I kind of went back in history, I realized that cemeteries started as kind of graveyards, right? So there were the graves in the yard of the church.
Yep.
And and then became something different and became more municipality based, and the church disappeared. And so without saying, I think that the church, religious, non-religious, whatever, the thing is, it's about community and having support. And if
Mm.
there's no place for gathering, then who gets to bring the casserole? I mean, I'm
Right.
hungry.
Right.
Like you want to be able to have that passive support without it being like this, I'm going to show up and say my name. And, you want to be able
Right.
to just show up and listen to some music and say hello to your person that's buried there and meet other people. And the men, the widows, oftentimes I'll see them get to know each other and they'll walk the trails together. They never knew each other before this, but they both experienced something really difficult. And I think that allowing for that space has become very rewarding for myself and for other people. In particular, there was a gentleman, one of my, I think it was my first or second season or first season of Life Forest, and his name's Alan. And Alan came to look for a plot for his wife, and his wife passed away around the same age as my mom of the same thing.
Mm.
Ugh.
And so Alan and I were walking the trail together, and as we were talking, it was like this moment of like, oh, and then this happened, and commiserating with each other about this disease and like how it felt and what it was like. And in that moment, I realized something. I was like, well, wow, like here you are thinking like, oh, I'm doing this amazing thing for my mom. And here I am realizing, wait a minute, mom is doing this for me. Like she knew that I had all this incredible trauma over what she went through. And she's bringing all these amazing supportive people to my life and giving me this purpose so that I can move on and change and move my own grief. And, I think where you guys are in the cemetery world, you probably believe in the power of wherever these
Right.
people are and being
Yep.
able to influence and help us. And it's really amazing to me how much that happens in the world and being able to kind of be a part of that and see that with families over and over again, these like we'll call it signs of life, where something will happen and you'll think, I mean, that there's too much going on where you can't think that somebody somewhere is helping us out
Right.
here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, no,
So
we say it all the time. So many, especially recently with the number of guests that we've had recently who have, in this case, have delved historically into particular stories or whatever. But in some cases, the people telling these stories had zero connection to the cemetery, the grave, the person,
yeah.
but something drew them to it. And
Right.
then from there, it's just snowballed for them. And they've written books and they've, done all these
Wow.
other things because something guided them that wasn't there, but sparked it. And same thing with Life Force. So tell us a little bit about how burials work at Life Force. Like, is it a traditional funeral type thing? Is it cremations only? Tell us how that all works and how you get your trees and what goes from there.
So we are cremation or composted remains only. In Maine, it's cremation only at this time. Um, and our services are not traditional, but they are. I mean, we have at this point, I have death care professionals on the team
Nice.
because it's so important. The first season, I was like kind of welcoming people, and it takes a lot of education to be able to work with large amounts of people who are experiencing grief. And I didn't have that education. And what that does is allows for people to kind of just they want that structure and that where am I going? Where am I sitting? What am I doing?
Right.
Mhm.
Um, and so we have a director of our burial services. Her name's Tracy. And she's trained in death care, and we also have a death doula on our team. And they help to guide people when they come to the forest. And they also meet their officiant. They're either their funeral director or a different official, whoever they're, or the family member who maybe wants to say a word or two, and introduces them to the space. So it is a little different. You know, you have a tree
Quite
and
different.
the hole is round, it's not rectangular, you know. And we shroud our ashes in wool. So we do that because the ashes can be high in alkaline, which is can kind of make the soil a little bit salty.
Right.
And it may or may not be good for the tree, right? So if you have a really high acid in the soil, it could be dehydrate the tree almost, right?
Right. Which would defeat the purpose of what you're trying to do.
Exactly. So we worked with an environmental scientist, and the answer that we came up with was wool. Because as wool biodegrades, it releases sulfur, nitrogen, and magnesium that feed the soil, but it also protects those cremains while it biodegrades, and over time they neutralize.
Oh, cool.
So it's a really kind of an interesting scientific thing that I had no idea existed when I
Yeah.
started. I was like, wow. Um, so we have these beautiful soft shrouds. We have a member of our team, Racy, who has made them and puts them together by hand. And they come with a organic cotton bag. The cremains are placed in the bag like with a drawstring, folded
Mhm.
under, and then wrapped in all natural wool. That wool can be dyed with like onion skins or hibiscus if somebody wants to do something with a color. Um, and then they can either be sewn with a twine, and then we just kind of wrap a simple bow of yarn, of wool yarn.
Oh,
And then flowers are kind of placed within the yarn, and we have a table that we place the shrouded ashes on. And people will put out pictures and very much things like other, traditional burials would do. Um, and then at that point, there will be what you would see as a traditional service, somebody speaking, talking about memories, kind of anything that they want to share. But then what is special, and I have to hand it to our burial team. They have it down to this. It's almost like a grief dance. That they have created something so beautiful when you plant that tree. So either the family or one of the burial team will place the shroud in the ground. You hold for a moment and you allow for that time. Place gently in the ground, and then we plant the tree, but we do so in silence. And so the team knows exactly what soil needs to go next, how to place the tree, all of the things, and they communicate just by, their eyes. So it takes about 3 people, and then the tree is planted. The family oftentimes will place the memorial marker stake. We do a little QR code and a picture maybe of the family member or dates. The QR code goes to the Remembrance of Life page. And it's just really well done. It's quiet and peaceful, and you can hear the birds, and oftentimes there's butterflies, and people treasure those moments and those birds and those butterflies. So after the tree is planted, the burial team just steps back, and we allow the family their time with their tree. And they go for a walk afterwards if they wish. Dogs are always welcome on the property, so they usually have their pets with them. We also bury pets with people, and we deed those pets as well. So we send those pets' names. Everybody who's buried at Life Forest, their name, dates, vital statistics are tied to the coordinates of their burial plot, and then they're added as an addendum to the deed themselves, to the deed itself. So they have access rights to that space, and they're beneficiaries as well. And at any time, we can update the information of their beneficiaries if they wish by simply making another addendum to the deed. And so the beneficiaries will have the right to be able to choose who's buried there. And your beneficiaries do not need to be a relative. They can be the person of your choice. So that's a little bit different than traditional cemetery design,
Very
but we
different.
are, yeah, but I think it's important when you're dealing with cremation only, because when you're dealing with cremation only, the cremated remains are not respected the same way as a full body burial would be.
Right.
And so we have, because we're a legal cemetery, vital records are notified the state of New Hampshire, state of Maine. They're recorded as the final place of interment because we're a recognized cemetery,
Right.
which is really important. But I wanted to kind of create an extra layer of protection for those families. And in doing so, it gives them access rights to that space. So it's basically a public access easement to their space. They have an agreement on, the rules and regulations that about their burial spot. Can't build a tower or whatever. But I mean, we're pretty cool. Like, you want to plant flowers, sure. But and they'll have rights to it forever. So if you type in any of our burial families names, it will come up as Life Forest. So I can type in my mom's name, and she's on the deed of the property as well as 200 other people and pets at this
I love
point.
that the pets get put on there too.
Yeah.
Oh,
me too.
yeah. I mean, a lot of people really want to be commemorated with their animal companions. So why not?
We've shared a couple of stories about people who, and these are old stories, who were like, their wives were like, "You're absolutely not burying your dog in the cemetery," and the guy is like, "Well, then bury me outside the cemetery. What
Oh my God.
my dog
Yeah.
anyway." I've seen those stories over and over again. So I think this is a much better solution. Everybody can be together.
Yeah. And
The wife, the dog, and the husband.
well, we see a lot. I mean, we have, because we don't charge people extra, like however many sets of cremains you want to bury during an opening, it's no, there's no extra fee. So it's like you pay for your space, and it's cremains, there's plenty of space, right? Like, let's not.
Right. It's yeah. You don't need the six
Like,
foot
why?
deep
I
by
still can't
however
wrap my head
long by
around,
however
like,
wide.
and
Yeah.
then one set is this much, and then so I I don't know if my computer just popped something up. But so basically we've had people show up with like a drawer full of cremains. And they have like 12 sets of ashes at
Oh my
once.
gosh.
Where I'm like, okay, we can do this. And then, and a lot of times what happens is people have the very small urns that
Right.
are gifted to them. And that, they say, oh, well, this is my opportunity to put all of these ashes from my cabinet into a safe space. And
And
we
keep the
will
family
work,
together.
yeah, and we'll
Yeah.
work with the families, like, especially with the vital records, we'll say, is this person interned in another spot? Do because if we record them twice, which has happened,
Yeah.
because ashes
Right.
can be buried in more than one spot. So
Right.
we'll work with that. We'll work with the family if we see that they're interned somewhere else. Do you want them recorded or just deeded? That kind of thing. But yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, in every tree plant, as you have other openings, if we don't charge to open, we don't charge to close, we don't,
Wow.
it's the tree comes with it. There's no like perpetual care fees and all this stuff. Especially you want to be a natural forest, right?
Right. That's what
Where's
you
the
were
fee?
going for. You were going for not like super well
You're
tended.
gonna pay to watch that tree grow. Like, come on, like we want it to be natural and beautiful, and there is upkeep, but
Right.
not to the extent where you need to commit people to so much, so many fees and all this stuff.
Well,
I
and
didn't like that part of death
yeah.
care, so we left it out.
Well, and just, I mean, I've witnessed the placing of cremains because I used to work at a cemetery, and And some of these were like cremation gardens that they were all placed together. And it was not near as respectful and beautiful of how you do it. And it is just so it just adds an extra level of sacredness and respect that it's just blowing my mind right now how
Oh, thank
I
you.
saw the pictures online, and it's just so beautiful. And what I loved when I was looking at the website was, next to fact, land is becoming such a premium. I know for us, especially here in Colorado, that
Yep.
isn't developed. And what you are doing is creating a living, breathing space for these families to be able to come for generations. And it's just, wow.
I think
It's amazing.
cemetery, it's when I was kind of doing my homework, I spoke to this funeral director, and she said, things are changing in the death care world. And she said it used to be where it would be like 3 days of mourning, and you'd have this dinner, and then you would have like a viewing of the body. Then you would have like a service, a church service. Women would wear black for a certain amount of time. And she said, and now we've come to this place where people will say to me, literally say to me, just, cremate me and throw me in the trash or do whatever. And she's like, what? And she said, the problem is she said, people are kind of, we actually don't allow scattering. And I think that there's like a lot of healing that goes on with it. I have no judgment against it, but as a cemetery, we can't hold space for scattering. It has to be buried in
Contained.
order
Yeah.
to hold the space. And so we just don't, that's just not part of our offerings. But she said to me, there will be future, they will have nothing in the future, nothing. And I was like, what does that mean? What is she saying? They're gonna have nothing. And it brought me back to when I was 27. I took a trip to Sweden so that I could try to find the burial plot of my great, 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 great grandfather. And, I went out there, I got off the train, I met this woman who my grandmother had written back and forth with for years and found him through cemetery burial records. He took me there, and I looked upon the field, and I was like, I feel it in my generational blood. I feel, and I mean, as silly as that sounds, it's like I had this wonderful experience of learning about my family, but really in the long run, I learned about myself. I was like 20 something years old, traveling and experiencing life and getting to do all these things. And I had this purpose that kind of connected me to that. And what happens when you take that away, that generational tie?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not even just about the person that you really want to learn about or go to visit. It's about meeting the people along the way and kind of creating those experiences for yourself. So I think that's what she meant when the funeral director said to me, people will have nothing.
Well, and I think too, cremation has definitely become a much more popular form
Yeah.
of disposal now, just because it is far less expensive than burying a full body. You don't have to pay for a full casket and the vault that the casket goes in and all the things that go along with the traditional casket burial now. It does cost a lot less to cremate somebody, but when we spread the ashes, which, like you, I'm not opposed to it. And in fact, I've had family members who have had their ashes spread, but there's nowhere to go for the later generations, for those people to go and stand in a spot and know that the person that they were thinking, even 3 or 4 generations back, that maybe did something so phenomenal in their mind, or they found the journal, or they, whatever it was, or in future generations, the online imprint that they've left behind,
whatever it's going to be,
whatever it's going to be, the fact that you've created a place where these cremains are going, and they're going back into the earth, and they're still doing all the things that we think of in that traditional sense. But you've also created a spot where people can go find those records still, because they're not scattered to the wind now. They're in a place that still allows the first generation and the second and the seventh generation to still go back to and have that moment of like you had when you went to Sweden and you found that grave and you stood there and you felt that. And I don't think a lot of people make that kind of a connection until they're a little bit older. Like you were 27, so you're getting closer to your 30s. It's when it started to dawn on you that this is like an important thing. I think as teenagers and as maybe even in our younger 20s, it doesn't really hit that hard yet
Right.
because life to us is still pretty endless at that age, right? We haven't really, unless you've experienced loss on a big scale, which, you know, if it's been a parent or a grandparent, you're really close to or something, for you, mortality doesn't kick in until you're a little bit older. And then when you start to lose your parents and you start to lose a friend and you start, you know, and death really starts to creep in more, then some of that starts to hit us a little differently as we get older. And to have a place to go to where we can sit with those other generations and think about it and feel it, you've created that just like a traditional cemetery does, but in a definitely a more beautiful way, I think, a more because it's much more natural and much more like forgiving.
Like yeah, like a
Well,
very special park. I mean, it's just the whole idea is phenomenal. I mean,
oh, thank you. I mean, I think that where we are at in a society, we're understanding a little bit more about the importance of nature and being able to kind of global warming, and people are more eco-conscious. And
Definitely.
you know, there is a lot of ways to commemorate, and this isn't, you know, this isn't a natural it's not a green burial ground, and it's not a natural burial ground. And you know, there's like there's a side that really is wants that,
Mhm.
and I love that too. And I really love being able to walk through a historical cemetery in New England. But um I think cremation, it has become kind of the choice. And for all the reasons that you, Diane, that you stated, but also I think what it does is it gives people just a little bit more time, you know, to wrap their heads around like, what do I want to do? How am I going to deal with
Right.
this? Like death is so like as it is. Um, and so there's an appeal because they have some time to kind of process. Um, but when you're looking at the eco conscious world, cremation isn't that friendly because of the carbon offset. And
Right.
so, you know, you hope, okay, you realize the planting of the tree will to help to balance that, right? So the planting
Right.
of the tree, giving off and allowing for fresh air, but also just kind of meeting people where they're at. And people are kind of wanting just a little bit more of a natural environment. And you know, it's if I mean in New Hampshire it's like 70 or 80% of people cremate. So
that's what it is
it's,
here.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's kind of to the dismay of true environmentalists, I think. But at the same time, that's what's happening. And so this is at least uh, a little bit more of an eco-friendly option
Mhm.
for them. And it preserves land. It's in conservation,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, which is important. There's no
Yeah.
ever, you never be able to build on it or
Which I love. Yeah.
power. So, you know, we have a lot of battery operated fans and tools because we don't have any power, but
There's nowhere
you
to
know,
plug stuff in. Yeah.
yeah, because we're in conservation. But it's okay. You know, there's a whole ways around doing all of that stuff. And um it has been rewarding, and I've been able to meet really cool people like you guys, which I'm so thrilled that you took the time to talk to me today.
Oh, of
That's
course.
Well,
amazing.
and just, you know,
Like,
as painful as losing your mom at such a young age,
For
that,
both of you, because
yeah,
you
for
were
both
young
of
and she
you,
was young.
for her,
I don't know if you can like share screen, but if you can, I would love it if you, it's like a 2 minute video, you could play it and then it
Yeah,
would be
we can
done.
add your mom's video on here
Thank you.
when I do the editing process. I'll add that in.
Yeah. So if you play it through, you'll just see yeah, I'm very proud of my daughter for putting that video together,
Mhm.
but also it's like my job, I think, as a cemetery keeper is to protect space and to protect legacy. And when you
Yeah,
see a person
that's what I
and
was
talk
gonna
about the
say.
person,
Yeah, because your mom, when she said that she would come back, be a tree,
yeah, yeah,
little did you know that would be her legacy.
it
And
would, yeah, and I'm proud of it. And
yeah,
the tree that I chose for her is a dogwood tree
Oh,
because
love
when we
dogwoods.
were growing up, she was always very frugal, not cheap, not cheap. Frugal.
Frugal. I
She
like
always
it.
said that. I'm not cheap, I'm frugal. But she would be washing the dishes with shoulder pads as sponges because that's what you do when you're frugal.
Well, it
And
was
she
the
would be
80s. I mean, the shoulder pads were abundant.
they
It's
had to have
fine.
use. Like I have shoulders like a football player. But so she'd be washing the dishes and looking into the yard and I'm like, "Ma, what are you looking at?" And she's like, "The dogwood tree, honey." And I'm like, "Ma, there's nothing there." And she's like, "No, I know, but I can imagine how beautiful a tree would be in our
Oh.
yard. Can you just see it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that would be great. Why don't we get one?" And she's like, "Oh, sweetheart, they're very expensive."
oh my gosh.
And when she died, I was like, "She's getting a dogwood tree."
I
So
love that.
finally, yeah.
She got
And
her dogwood.
she got her dogwood, and when those flowers bloomed at first, I hadn't seen her smile in a decade. And
Oh,
I swear to you, I looked at that first bloom and I felt and saw her smile again.
Oh,
Like
she was. Yeah.
it felt so good. So, you know, so all of these things are really have become important to people and it's become very important in my own life. And so thank you for hearing all of
oh
that.
Oh
no.
my gosh,
This
this
is,
is so amazing. I
yeah.
mean,
You've shared two very important stories on this podcast with us today. So, as we say at the beginning, every life had a story. You shared your mom's story and
mhm.
how she was such a wonderful, brilliant mother, and then how, unfortunately, dementia took her from you in that respect. And the sad thing with dementia, especially any form of it, whether it's Alzheimer's or any of the other forms of dementia that fall under that umbrella, is most families who deal with it have to grieve twice because
Oh
you're
yeah.
grieving as you're losing the person because they're no longer the person they were as
Right.
the disease progresses, and then you grieve a second time when they physically pass away and you have to
Yes.
deal with that part of it. So there's two grieving processes that happen with dementia and certain other debilitating diseases like that slowly take your person from you. And so you've
Have you
shared that
experienced it?
story.
You speak of it so eloquently, it makes me think you may have had this experience yourself.
um Not personally, but I did work on I'll take that back. I have a great grandmother who did pass away from dementia, but I didn't spend a lot of time with her at that stage in her life. But I was very fortunate to be a stage manager for a show that was
Oh,
written about dementia. And it's like a 45-minute musical. It was A Kiss for My Daughter, A Kiss for My Father is the name of the show. And it was really the father-daughter relationship. And from the time that it starts really with him as a young man falling in love, getting married, and then having a child, which he never thought he'd be a father, right? Like this is a whole new ball game. And then the experience of raising this child, and she grows into a woman, and then he has some form of dementia. Now we used to, when we were doing this production, we would talk about Alzheimer's and stuff, but he develops some form of dementia and he starts forgetting who she is. There's a
Yeah.
beautiful moment in the show, though, where he's trapped in his own head in one of the songs that wraps around what we think somebody with dementia may be going through because we don't know exactly. Because, like you said, she stared at a ceiling for 5 years because she couldn't move and she couldn't talk anymore. But there's got to be something, that little bit left
yeah.
in there, and you would see a spark of it every once in a while. And so it goes through that whole thing, and the whole show ends with, we don't know if he's passed away yet at this point or not, but it ends with the daughter being angry and sad and scared and all the emotions that somebody who has
Mm.
to deal with on the caregiving side is going to go through.
Well,
um,
my mother, my brother's mother-in-law, um,
Hmm.
had dementia. And that was when at the graveside, his wife, my sister-in-law, said that she lost her twice.
Mm.
And her mom was such amazing woman, and we all know how it
Uh-huh.
can change, but yeah, they lose them twice.
Well, and when we would
Yeah.
do this show, we would do a Q&A afterwards with the audience. And so many of the audience members were people who were either current caregivers to somebody suffering from dementia or had been through it. And so I was very fortunate in being a part of these discussions of hearing all these personal experiences of husbands and wives and children who had taken care of their family members and who could express that. The gentleman who wrote the play, his name is Mitch. He's fabulous. He's a brilliant writer and musician. He he hadn't personally experienced any of this when he wrote this, but he had a fear of it. He's very close to his own daughter. He has a very lovely
Mm.
relationship, and that's kind of what led to him writing this particular script.
Mm.
And we were able to get a grant for a couple of years where we were able to take it into
Wow.
churches and nursing homes and all these other places. We took it into people's houses a few times where we did it in
Amazing.
somebody's home. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
The nice thing about a 2-man show is that it's a little easier to transport than other shows. And there wasn't really, I mean, the set consisted of 2 chairs and a bench and a blanket, and a hat tree, because there were some hats and stuff that got changed, but that was it. And our 2 actors, the majority of the time who did the show, were just phenomenal. You would have thought that they were a real father-daughter team, and they were not, but they pulled it off so well. They were both so talented. And it gave us a moment to talk with all of these people who had dealt with dementia. And I'll never forget one of the discussions we had. There was an older gentleman whose wife had passed away due to dementia. And he's the only one out of all the people we talked to, hundreds of people. But the one thing that has stuck with me, he said, it was a privilege to take care of her till the very end. Even through the hallucinations and the frustrations and the hard things, he felt so privileged that he was the one who was physically able to still care for her. And then he started, he was a retired lawyer at that point. So he actually started a foundation to help people who are going through it, to try and do sort of pre-planning type of stuff before the person's so far gone that they can't have their wishes met. Because that's another thing that you don't think about until it might become too late. And what does this person want? And fortunately, your mother had you as a huge advocate. You knew your mom well, and you knew what she would and wouldn't like when it came to final burial. You knew that just getting her ashes in a Starbucks parking lot was not enough for her. But you also knew that you didn't want this big grand stone in the ground to commemorate her either. So he had formed a whole thing about, here's resources for where you can go to help get all this planned before it's too late, before the person can't tell
That's
you anymore
awesome.
what they want. So I feel very fortunate to have been part of those conversations and part of that production. I would love to see Mitch be able to bring it
He
back.
should come to Life Forest and
Well,
do
he's
it.
in New Jersey, so he's not far
That's
from
not
you
that
now.
far. I would be,
Yeah.
I don't know
should
if I would
connect the two of
survive
you.
it emotionally, but I would love to.
I don't know. Every
was
time,
really
and I
great.
will fully admit, I don't know how many times we did the production over a course that we had the grant for about a 2-year period, and we had done it slightly before that. So I have no idea at this point how many times I watched the show, and I can tell you quite honestly, there were only 2 times where I did not cry ever during the production. And it's only because one of the times I was, most of the time, Mitch or somebody else would come and play the music live for the performers. So we had a piano player, but there was one time Mitch wasn't available and our backup piano player wasn't available. So I had to run tracks for the actors. So I was so focused on making sure that those tracks hit at the right moment and that all of that I did not have time to focus on them and their storytelling. Yeah. And the other time, it was because I sat outside the room where it was performing because we were waiting on somebody else to get there. But the building we were in, you had to keep it locked and let people in. So I was sitting outside waiting to let people in. So I wasn't there. You
couldn't actually hear it.
But I will guarantee you, every other time I was there, I would cry. And part of it was because that was at the time my oldest daughter was getting ready to graduate from high school. And so there's a whole scene where, she's going off to college and all this stuff. And I was like, buckets. Did it at my first rehearsal. I had no idea what the show was about the first time I went to a rehearsal for it, and buckets. I was like, really? Thanks. but
It really is. It's like it is the most traumatic disease. You know, I use the description, you become like you're no longer a three-dimensional person to your person. Like you
right.
become like this cardboard cutout of a person that they recognize, and you're like just trying to sell them hope out of an empty briefcase. Like,
Mm.
you're just constantly like, it's going to be okay. And, but meanwhile, you're bawling your eyes out in the car, and then you put on I remember taking her from a dementia unit to bring her into a locked unit and trying to make it sound like she was going to this beautiful new apartment with beautiful plants and like selling this like gorgeous idea and putting makeup on her. Mom, this is going to be amazing. And she's like, okay, and showing her the flowers as they like lock the door behind her, and
Oh,
I just, it's a horrible, horrible disease.
Yeah.
So, I hope to goodness that there's some sort of way to heal this disease and in the future.
Oh,
That would be good.
yeah. Definitely,
Really
yeah.
good.
For anybody who's had to watch somebody go through it, and then, like you said, and then you grieve twice because you're grieving at the time and you're frustrated. You did make one good point though, and I heard this from a lot of people, is being in that moment. Sometimes, when you were warming your mom's feet up and you could see that moment
that
in her
one.
eyes where she kind of
Mhm.
relaxed because her feet were warm. She couldn't express that they were cold before, but you figured out they were cold and you warmed them up for her. And so a lot of people would say being in that moment when you're with your person, yes, you're going to get emotional before. Yes, you're going to be emotional after, but you had that moment while you were with them. And a lot of them really cherished those little bitty moments like that, where they would see that tiny little spark for just a second, because that was their loved one again for just that one moment while it was there. So I think you've done a
Yeah.
phenomenal job
Oh my
of
gosh,
sharing
yes.
her story, sharing the pain of her story, especially from your perspective as her sounds like primary caregiver. um in addition to, but here's the other part of the story that I started to get to and then we got sidetracked, but you were doing all of that for her and taking care of your own children at the same time. So you were being her caregiver and their caregiver.
Right.
And you probably during those biggest moments and during those 5 years especially didn't really think about you much because you were too busy thinking about them and
Yeah,
making sure everybody else was taken care of, as moms tend to do anyway, because that's what we all end up doing.
that's true.
And so
Yeah.
you're creating again her burial space the way you created it and putting that dogwood tree on there brought
Yeah.
that was for you as much as it was for her, like for your own
Absolutely.
healing and your own
I love it there.
moving forward.
I love Life Forest. I love being there. I love all the trees and I love all the people that are buried under them that I never even got to meet. I do. Like, I listen to the families and I ask them about them and I listen to the nuances of how they lived and I celebrate them and I talk to them and I love them. I
I'm
do.
so glad. Well, and I'm sure they
It's
feel
like
that,
I'm
which
sure
helps them.
Yeah.
well, it feels to me like there's a real warmth and appreciation for the space. And the gorgeous thing is that when we first started, it was like this kind of, it was logged by loggers. It was this ugly space. And every time somebody plants this beautiful tree, it becomes better and more beautiful all the time.
I love it.
And that's the families creating that. That's those people that have created this beautiful space, not
The
me.
space is
Not,
just beautiful. I had no idea it was logged off and this brought it back. I mean, it is just so, so, so beautiful. It
I know, and
really,
we've only seen pictures of it online, but
will come and visit. I
I
love
know
that.
we'll need to. So you have two locations. You have the one in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, which is your
Yep.
original location. And
Yep.
as we mentioned at the beginning, May 18th, you have your grand opening for the new
Yep.
location in Auburn, Maine. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about what's going to be
Sure.
happening that day and if they're interested in, if they're in the area?
Yeah, so May 18th, we are going to be at 589 Trap Road in Auburn, Maine at Whistle Ridge. So it's Life Forest, Whistle Ridge.
I love it.
The stewards of the land. So this is what we have coined a host site. So we have them, the woman that owned the land had a large animal composting facility as well as 80 acres. They
Wow.
wanted to put those 80 acres into conservation and be able to enjoy them. And so we partnered with them and we established them as a legal cemetery. We did all of their mapping for them. We did all the work and set it up, and they put their land in conservation, and we're kind of working together. So it's Life Force Whistle Ridge. I'm very proud of the location and the stewards of that location. And my hope is that there'll be more people who have land that want help putting it into conservation,
Yes.
and we can help them and work with them to do that. So that's kind of what we're doing, and
That's
I'm very
amazing.
proud of it. So yeah, I
Absolutely
hope to see
amazing.
anybody there. And that's going to be a woodland burial location. They are not going to be planting trees. They're simply going to be creating pathways in which people
Oh,
can walk
nice.
and have natural burial locations, burial spots, 3 by 3 spots, as many sets of ashes as somebody wants to bury in one opening.
Oh, I
So
love that.
no extra fees or anything like that.
Right.
So, there's people who really want that, like the very natural, no tree planted, just want to walk in the woods. And this is what they're going to be offering. And
I
it's
love
really
it.
lovely. I
Oh. Oh.
built a bench there today in 67-degree weather that felt like 150 when you used.
It is a little rough to get used to the warmer temperatures after it's been cold. So, I mean, we all are like, can we get over the cold weather, get over the
I
cold weather?
know.
Yeah.
And
And
then
then
it
it
gets
hits
cold.
and you're
You're
like, you go, can I
I'm
have
gonna
my snow
call it
back for
in.
a day?
Yeah.
like, oh.
Well, Mel, thank you so much for taking
Thank
time
you
out this
You're
so
evening
much.
to
welcome.
join us and tell us all about Life Forest. Folks, we will have links in the show notes to Life Force, and we will also make sure you stick around for the end of this episode. We will have the video of Mel's mom for you to watch so that you can definitely see what this was all about in the first place. So, again, Mel, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you
Thank
for
you,
everything you
Diane. Thank
did.
you,
Thank
Jenny.
you.
Of
I hope to meet
course.
you in person someday.
Oh, me too. We're
Yep.
Okay.
New Hampshire and Maine are on the list.
Okay. Sounds perfect. Bye, ladies.
Goodbye.
Kind, helpful, lots of fun, an infectious laugh.
Happy birthday! With the kids, have you helping them?
She was an intelligent, talented, articulate person, compassionate, all of her life compassionate. Compassionate for people who were being picked on, who were considered lesser than.
I'm just resting my eyes. I'm not sleeping.
Didn't always get what we wanted because she didn't want to spoil us. But if we needed it and it was important, she would move heaven and earth to get it done. And it always amazed me, and I always loved her for it very much.
You're still a pretty, okay? Oh, I love you so much.
My sister was compassionate, was just great, and I always thank her for that.
We thank you for taking time to join us today for the Ordinary Extraordinary Chat with Mel Bennett and Life Forest Cemetery. I mean, I know I was amazed, and it's just what an incredible thing and a legacy that she created for her mom. So
Oh, it's so beautiful.
it is,
Absolutely beautiful.
yeah. So hopefully everyone will have a chance to look at the photographs that Jennie will put up, and it is just amazing. To learn more about today's discussion, please visit our website, theordinaryextraordinarycemetery.com, where you will find additional links in our show notes. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel, The Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery Podcast. This really helps us be more visible to others on YouTube who also may enjoy our podcast.
And please don't forget to visit us on social media, where we share all kinds of cemetery photos, quotes, tidbits, and more. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, and on X at OrdExtraCem. So OrdExtraCem. If you enjoyed this or any of our episodes, please consider leaving a 5-star review and a comment on Apple's podcast, Spotify, or directly on our website. You can also leave those same comments on YouTube. Your positive reviews and enthusiasm for our show help others who love cemeteries and history to discover us and all of our ordinary, extraordinary stories. And if you're feeling extra generous and want to help support the podcast in a financial way, you can now buy Dianne and I a cup of coffee, either through YouTube or on our website. Simply click on the coffee cup icon and it will allow you to make a donation.
Until we meet again.